My house stands on the edge of the town, where the roads end and the silence of the fields and forests begins. Here, in a dilapidated two-story house with creaking stairs and faded curtains, I live out my days. I am already 83. And every morning I start the same way, with silence. Not the blessed silence that comes after noise, but the silence of an emptiness that cannot be filled. My sons do not call. My grandchildren look at me as if I am an inconvenience. At the clinic, they confuse my name. At the store, the cashier does not even look me in the eye. And I was once someone. Eric. A veteran. A businessman. A father who raised his children alone after the death of his wife. A man of honor. And now, a shadow. Every morning I wake up at 6:30, put on a shirt that I ironed myself the night before. I make oatmeal with 2 raisins, always exactly 2. I sit at the big table where my children and grandchildren used to sit. Now only one chair is in use. The others are like reminders. John and Rebecca have long had their own lives, one a lawyer, the other a doctor. Successful. And very busy. Too busy to remember who gave them all this. My home is no longer a home, but a waiting room. Waiting for a call, a letter, a visit. Waiting for the end? Maybe. But it doesn't come. Instead, there is daily disappointment. It is sticky, like autumn fog. I catch glances at me, in the bank, in the store, on the street, and I see indifference, sometimes pity in them. The worst thing is when contempt flashes in their eyes. My granddaughter once jokingly said, "Grandpa, maybe it's time for a nursing home?" I smiled. Of course. What else do I have left? I walk the same road every day, to the store and back. 600 meters. In the store, no one asks how I am. I've heard, "He's here again, he's been counting change for so long." It's like a knife through a living being. In the hospital, it's even worse. The young doctor, thinking that I can't hear, said to the nurse, "He's old, like everyone else. Lonely, that's why he complains about everything." They laughed. And I heard. I always hear everything. And although the world around me doesn't seem to change, the trees rustle, the rain drips, something inside me changes. Every night, lying in bed, I don't fall asleep, but listen to the silence. But it's not that empty silence anymore. It's a mirror. In it, I see myself, young, strong, worthy. And I realize, what's happening now is not just oblivion. It's betrayal. I was betrayed by those for whom I lived, worked, and sacrificed. I didn't scream. I took a pen and a notebook. Slowly but surely I wrote, "They have forgotten who I am. It is time to remind them." This was the first entry. And the first crack in the wall of my silence. My breathing became deeper. And the sparkle appeared in my eyes again. The same spark that was in me when I was still fighting. Only now it would be a different war. I was once a force. Not an idea of force, not a symbol, but the very essence of force. At 21, I was standing on a foreign land with a gun in my hands, staring death in the eyes. I remember the faces of my comrades, Jack, Marco, Thomas. We all thought we would return as heroes. But most of us never did. I survived. I don't know how. God must have left me for a reason. I never bragged about my past. But my scars are real. Like the nighttime screams that woke me up in a sweat decades later. I had no right to be weak. Not then. And not after, when I was left alone with 2 children in my arms. Mary, my Mary. Her heart stopped when John was only 6 and Rebecca wasn't yet fully speaking. When I buried her, I didn't cry. I held John's hand and whispered, "Everything will be okay. I will make it happen." And I did. I worked day and night, building a business from nothing. I cut, sawed, traded wood, negotiated until my eyes were glued shut. I raised them myself. Without nannies, without pampering, but with unconditional love. I taught them how to survive, how to fight, how to be worthy. They had everything: education, houses, start-up capital. And I? I had only pride. And silence. I remember those years. When I was respected. People listened when I spoke. I would come to a cafe, and the owner would serve coffee without even hearing the order. I was the one they went to for advice, for help. And I helped. Selflessly. Because I believed that good should be returned. And now? No one remembers. As if it were all a fiction. Not even my children. When I remind them, remember how I sold my car to pay for your education? They smile blankly. Like a memory from someone else's life. Like an anecdote. And this indifference, it didn't happen suddenly. It seeped in slowly, like rain on an old roof. First, remoteness. Then, coldness. And now, outright neglect. They think I don't notice. That I'm just an old man who has forgotten everything. But no. I remember every sacrifice. And every look they give, in which there is only fatigue from my existence. I begin to remember more than before. My memory clings to moments that I once considered ordinary. How Mary sang in the kitchen. How John fell off his bike for the first time, and I picked him up without saying a word. How Rebecca cried over the boy, and I just sat next to him. And was silent. I was always there. And where are they now? I look in the mirror. The face is old. But in my eyes, the person I was is still alive. I haven't disappeared. I've just become quieter. But those who think that old age is the end forget that it is in silence that the loudest storms are born. The most sore is not silence, but words spoken in whispers, but loud enough to hear. Once, after John's regular visit, I heard his conversation with Rebecca. They didn't know that I was standing behind the door. His condition is only deteriorating. We cannot adapt constantly, John said. You can think about the house for the elderly, paid, good. There are care and nurse. It will be easier for us. It will be easier for us. These words were cut into memory, like a scalpel. No one asked what I think. No one thought that I still had the right to choose. In their eyes, I became a burden. Human furniture that prevents you from moving. A few days later, Rebecca brought me medicine. A short visit, almost no conversation. She left the package on the table and already went when I asked. How are children? Okay, Grandpa, she said automatically. But you know. You could complain a little less. Everyone's life is difficult. Complain? I didn't say a single word about myself. I just asked about grandchildren. But in her voice there was an annoyance that could not be hidden. She went hastily without even looking back. The grandchildren also became different. David, the elder, somehow came with the phone and, while I tried to tell something about the service, said, Grandpa, you have already told. Times 100. Maybe a better silence? I fell silent. But not because he had nothing to say. And because at this moment something has cracked in me. From that day, I started keeping a diary. Not just notes, no. I recorded details, dates, names, intonations, phrases. Anyone who offended, who neglected, who betrayed, got there. I didn't plan anything. At first. But this list. It grew up. And something else has grown in me, something deep and dark. I was called hysterical in the hospital. When I said that I have my heart pain, the young therapist looked in my direction and, without hiding disdain, said, Yes, you are just lonely. It's not a heart, it's emotions. Emotions? I, who stood the war, buried my wife, lifted the plant on my feet, now, it turns out, just an emotional grandfather. At the mail when I asked the employee about the payment, she rolled her eyes. Lord, if every such grandmother asked 3 times, we would never have finished. All these little things are not just images. These are wounds. And I remembered everyone. I looked at the people and no longer saw anything real in them. Everyone was in a hurry, annoyed, avoided. There is no room in the world for those who have already given everything. For such as me. And then I started thinking. Not about revenge. About justice. If they don't want to listen, I will make them hear. If they are indifferent, I will make the indifference will be a punishment. The silence of my home was no longer silence. It turned into a team center. I got old address books. Old photos. Old contacts. And began to analyze. Who became anyone? Who is afraid? Who hides? I am old. But not stupid. And the memory of me is good. Very good. It happened on Monday. The day, like all the others, was gray, damp, colorless. I went out to the store because I had run out of cereal. 2 young girls were standing at a bus stop nearby. One of them was laughing loudly, showing something on her phone. I approached her and asked politely, calmly, as always, "Excuse me, can you tell me what time it is?" The girl looked at me with contempt, as if I had asked for something disgusting. The other burst out laughing. "You're all just waiting to be pitted," she said, as if she had spat in my soul. I didn't have time to answer. There was a noise in my ears, my heart was echoing like a drum. My legs gave out. I fell. Right there, on the asphalt, in a puddle, among other people's voices, other people's faces. And no one, not one, came up. Didn't bend down. Didn't ask if I was hurt. I lay there and saw the gray sky. Cold as their hearts. And at that moment something in me died. No, not my soul. A soul hardened by war, loneliness, death. My hope died. But instead something else was born. An old, dark force. A quiet but ruthless conviction, would no longer be a silent victim. I got up alone. Slowly, carefully. And went home, trembling, but with a cold fire in my chest. I went into the house, took off my wet coat, and instead of the usual tea, sat down at the table. I took out my diary. I wrote down a few pages. Literally. Who, when, what they said. How I looked. How I ignored. In each line, not an insult. Testimony. I am no longer just Eric. I am a memory. And I will remind them all. My house, once a prison of silence, has turned into a headquarters. I stopped going to the store. I ordered everything online. I didn't want to see these faces anymore. I wanted to see them differently, confused, destroyed by their own hypocrisy. I wanted the truth to burn their tongues. And then, I remembered one man. A former acquaintance from my army days, named Harold. We were different, but in one way, the same. He had connections. He knew how the system worked from the inside. We hadn't seen each other in decades. But I dialed his number. The same one written down in an old notebook. He answered. The voice was dull, old. But alive. Eric? Are you alive, damn it, alive? And I need to do something. Are you with me? A pause. Then a short, always. Thus began my new game. Not physical revenge. No. That would be too easy. I decided to give them what they feared most, the truth. Invisible, insidious, logical. I studied them as I once studied maps at headquarters. I knew who depended on whom. Who was hiding what. Who was fighting with whom. And I set traps, psychological ones. Letters. Anonymous messages. Facts that appeared at the right moment. Suspicions that ate away at the family from within. And I was like a shadow. Without words. Without presence. But with an omnipresent silence. The game didn't start with threats or open confrontation. I didn't burn bridges, I made them burn them themselves, step by step, without realizing who was putting the matches in their hands. I became the architect of an invisible catastrophe. First, I took care of the information. When you're old, you're not noticed. Which means you can see and hear everything. I visited a lawyer I knew. We used to work together on real estate issues. He happened to have John's signature scanner in his office. I didn't take anything, I just took a picture. I knew what every movement of his hand looked like. He himself bragged about it in his youth. I reconnected with two old friends, Harold and Lester. One was a former IT guy, the other an accountant. They were, like me, tired of the world that had betrayed them. We met in my studio, and I laid out the plan for them. They were silent for a long time. Then Lester smiled. "It'll be beautiful." "It will be fair," I replied. We acted quietly. Harold found the right access points. All I needed was the truth, everything the kids were hiding. John was involved in tax fraud. Rebecca, she signed documents for pharmaceutical companies without reading the fine print. I didn't want to ruin them. I wanted them to feel what it was like to lose respect, trust, and reputation. What it was like to be useless. I started sending out letters. Not from me, anonymously. Each one contained excerpts from real documents, stitched together with emotional details. The letter reached Rebecca through her clinic, and a week later she was summoned to the board of directors. John was accidentally mentioned in an article by a local journalist, who had received an anonymous dossier. And most interestingly, a rift began to develop between them. They were arguing. I heard it during their visit. They spoke in whispers, but I heard every word. I also wrote a few letters as a good Samaritan to people my kids knew. I just pointed out things that could be talked about. And they were. People don't need proof, they need an excuse. As for the grandchildren, I took a different approach. I left David in the game. They sent him a letter, supposedly from an old teacher, reminding him of how David had once bullied a classmate. He was forced to come out publicly and apologize. And to Emily, the youngest, I sent a letter with a copy of a photo of her mother when she was young, with the caption, "This woman held your life in her hands. Think about how you hold her." She cried the next time she came to my house. But I didn't go out to her. Let her sit in silence. I didn't want to destroy them. I wanted them to remember. To look me in the eye again, not out of duty, but out of shame. And I saw their behavior change. Rebecca began writing short messages. John tried to start conversations about the past. The grandchildren became more polite. But I was in no hurry to forgive. That was not the goal. The goal was not punishment. The goal was balance. My journal was different now. I wrote not only facts, but also thoughts. About dignity. About fear. About the memory that they are trying to erase. I wrote about how to preserve yourself when no one sees you anymore. And most importantly, I was not writing for them. I was writing for myself. To remember, who am I? And you know what surprised me the most? For the first time in years, I didn't feel old. I felt alive. Today is Tuesday. An ordinary day, but inside me is a different kind of silence. Not empty, not despairing. Silence is completion. Silence in which everything has fallen into place. My children no longer look up. They come, not often, but no longer because they have to, but because they are ashamed. There is uncertainty in their voices, an attempt to turn back time in their looks. But time does not turn back. It only leaves traces. And shadows. David came again with a book. He sat down in silence. And we read together. Without a word. Emily brought me tea. And, most surprisingly, she did not run away. She simply sat and looked out the window. Maybe for the first time she saw the world as I see it every day. My acquaintances, those who used to avoid me, now greet me. Not all of them, of course. But it is enough for me to feel, I am noticed again. Sometimes that is enough. I did not look for gratitude. I didn't expect an apology. I just wanted everyone who despised to feel the depth of what they despised. So that no one else would look at people like me through the eyes. I'm sitting on the porch. The autumn sun illuminates my diary. I turn the pages. There's anger, pain, analysis, and silence. But the last entry isn't about them. About me, I didn't become a monster. I became a mirror. And those who were afraid to look learned to see. Memory isn't just history. It's a weapon. It's protection. It's the roots that keep a person from falling. I didn't forgive, because forgiveness is mercy. And I don't want to be merciful. I want to be worthy. Always. And if one of them ever asks me why I did it, I won't answer. Because the answer is in their eyes. In their change. In their new fear of being who they were. And that's a real victory. And the last entry I left in my diary was today. I wrote it slowly, firmly, drawing out each letter. Never forget, the quietest voices sound the loudest when the world is not listening. But everyone will have to listen. I closed the diary. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled.